Are you ready to geek out? This is a total science emergent episode. I'm really just pulling 4 recent studies that show the effects of hormones on muscle. And that's important because we've always known, and I've been talking about for a decade now, the fact that hormones influence exercise and exercise influences hormones. So we have to both look at it from the standpoint of, all right, let's look at you. How do you feel? What's going on with you right now? How much stress are you under? How's your sleep? How's your libido? How's your digestion? All of it. And then we also look at, all right, and what exercise are you doing right now? Because that's a factor that's going into this whole complete bucket that's making up you and your life and all the components of it right now. We've got to look at both. But really what I'm doing is I've pulled some recent studies, and recent being since 2019, pretty recent. And 2020, 2021, the majority of them are from that. And I think there was just one from 2019. So it's nice to know we're getting a little bit more press. We're getting a little bit more attention, and that's going to continue to grow. The challenge with some of the studies that are coming out, even that I've included here, is that they're small. So what we really like to see in a study is they've studied at least 1,000 people, or in, say, a study that is a review of literature, that they've looked at enough studies to gather at least 1,000 subjects who are just like you. And the bigger, the better. However, I think we also have to look at all research in all topic areas starts small. And then it built. It's almost like these are pilot studies. We're trying to get some framework for the bigger studies to come. So it's all good. But I do want you to take this with a grain of salt. None of these were huge studies. So there's that. All right. So I'm going to give you suggestions on what to do based on the research. And that is hinted at also in the research by the researchers who are interpreting and having the discussions and giving the end conclusions. Treating women post-menopause with either a placebo or estradiol increased their muscle mass. That's the one we're kicking off with. So stay tuned. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns, and I share what to eat and how to move and how to change your mindset so that maybe you can adapt or adopt new ways of thinking, moving, and eating so you can have the energy and vitality that you want, need, and deserve in this second and better half. And right now, I do want to let you know while I'm recording this live and releasing it in July, just really at kickoff of our second half of the year, the cafe membership is open for enrollment. We only open twice a year for open enrollment. That includes the monthly option and the much more economically advantageous annual option. And I'll tell you, full disclosure, total transparency, why I also love the annual membership is because you don't have to stop and think every month and make up that commitment again, decide to quit or to not quit. And you say yes to yourself as if this is a long-term commitment that you're going to do. You agree. I'm in. I'm saying yes to myself for a year, realizing that wherever you are right now at this moment in time, if it's not right where you want to be, that what you're about to do, my hope is that you've watched me long enough, you've followed me long enough, heard my voice long enough, whispering in your ear. That sounds a little creepy, I know. So that you know, I could listen to this, I could follow this. This has science behind it, maybe also a little humor, maybe also, I know she's in the boat rowing with me, but there is something for you that is that, okay, this is it. I know you have choices. Honestly, I know you don't have a whole lot of great choices. there's not a whole lot of good choices based on research for menopause. There are a lot of programs now slapping the word midlife women or menopause onto them. But simply because a trainer or fitness instructor is a midlife woman does not mean that their unique experience will also fit you. You've really got to do your homework and know who you're talking to. And my hope is that that homework led you here and kept you here. So the first date is something, but the second date, now we're talking. Okay. So I'm going to put the link to the cafe. It's flipping50.com/cafe, by the way, but don't go right away. Listen to the science first. So this first study I'm sharing, I hinted at it. They took a group of postmenopausal women, divided them up into two different groups, and blindly either gave one group a placebo or gave the other group estradiol, hormone replacement, in other words. Treating the women postmenopause with estradiol increased their muscle mass. Exercise is also an important factor in this, right? Better results were noted in those who were taking the actual supplement than those that were taking the placebo, which is like shooting blanks. The loss of estrogen, or this particular form of estradiol, was directly associated with a lack of muscle when there was no additional stimulus for muscle, meaning somebody wasn't exercising, or at least not exercising hard enough, intense enough. And I know you hear me say that regularly. And for somebody listening, that may scare you a little bit because maybe your doctor said it doesn't have to be hard. And that doctor potentially either, number one, doesn't know exercise, hasn't actually studied it. How much exercise science do you think they get in medical school? Knowing they get about 2 hours of nutrition? Yeah, not very much. So unless they're quote unquote calling themselves an expert because they exercise, right? But how often does your doctor do that about nutrition? They eat. Does that make them a nutritionist? I don't know. I don't think so. Not for my doctor anyway. But what is important is that you're exercising according to science, according to what we know has worked, not according to studies where there's protocols that show this didn't make any difference. You know, okay, they're removing, there might be other benefits, but it didn't necessarily help, say, the muscle or the bone or the brain health. So we're really concerned about those most of all. So what are the things that you can do? So based on this study, if you weren't going to take estradiol, maybe you personally have simply decided, I don't want to do that. I would rather not. Number one, lift heavier weight. Get to the heaviest weight you personally can safely do and do that weight to muscular fatigue each and every set. Then number two, eat a higher level of and higher quality of complete proteins at each meal. There is a threshold. It's at least 30 grams of protein. The higher above that you can tolerate without getting too full, the better. Number three is do all that while reducing stressors. Cortisol breaks down muscle. It is what we call a catabolic hormone, breaking them down. We want things like the estradiol that are building them up, the stimulus for testosterone, which is weightlifting, building them up, the stimulus for growth hormone, which is weightlifting, and good sleep that builds you up. So you've got to reduce those other stressors. And then last but not least would be looking at your hormone replacement therapy. And not that that won't help, but I truly believe we need to do the lifestyle habits first and then go and reach for that. Whether you're in perimenopause, still cycling, just not maybe regularly, now is the time potentially to begin HRT if you're thinking about it. It'll help you stabilize things. Your dose will probably fluctuate a little bit more as you're still kind of in that irregular cycling, and it'll become more stable after you go into postmenopause. You'll kind of finally dial it in. Here's where you're at. You're not going to change a lot after postmenopause, but your lifestyle habits can become a factor. So that research was in the Iran Journal of Public Health in 2021, fairly recent. I'm going to go right in to another study. Lean body mass is negatively associated with the incidence of hot flashes. Data suggests that maintaining higher levels of lean body mass. How do you get that? You guessed it, strength training during menopause transition, whether that's your late stage perimenopause, early stage postmenopause, has a protective factor against the development of hot flashes and night sweats. So it's called vasomotor symptoms, right? So you can reduce those symptoms with increased levels of lean body mass. The earlier in your adult life you start strength training, the more lean muscle mass you have by midlife, and potentially the lighter or lesser or non-existent hot flashes and night sweats are. So many fitness professionals agree with this. I recently did a podcast. I was a guest on one with Helen Fritsch. Age is Irrelevant. You might want to listen to that, listen to the podcast and catch it, see if it resonates with you. But, we both talked about the fact that we thought that we'd sailed through it. We were, I think, over the average age, 51.3. That's where it is. And I was 56, and I thought, I just sailed through this. No, so easy. What are all these people talking about? I mean, I had major stressors that hit me one year. I was exposed to mold another year. But it wasn't until that really tragic year that a lot of things were going on that I did then experience the weight gain from cortisol that seemingly came on out of nowhere because I was doing a lot of training. Did you hear what I said right there? And I heard myself saying it, and I wanted to let it be said because I want you to hear what I did. I defaulted. Hear me? I defaulted to what we think always works is training a lot. So wouldn't I be in better shape? No, not if you're in that midlife spin. That midlife spin means as you apply more and more stress with more and more training, if you think becoming an endurance athlete, training for hours will mean that's going to be lower body fat and you can eat anything. No, and no. Potentially you will be storing more body fat because you have higher levels of cortisol. You will become more insulin resistant for training. You will think you still need higher carbohydrates for energy. You'll be tired all the time because of your hormones, but you'll be telling yourself you need more carbohydrates. This is a downward spin, sister. So those of you out there who are endurance trained athletes, and you keep thinking, if I could just get back to that where I was when I was training and doing all that, you're not going back. It's an impossibility to go back in time. We have to reframe forward and realize we were the problem. Unintentionally. We didn't know any better. We were getting stoked, right? We were getting all these compliments from people saying, you're amazing. I could never do that. How do you do that? Right? And it feels really good. And then you get this identity that comes from being an endurance athlete, and you like it and you begin to adopt it. And it's like who you are. Like, I do this, and it's a sense of pride. And it's not something you wear externally and you go tell everybody, but it is something that, when people ask you, it's flattering. There is something about it that I believe we all like. And, for me, it's become an incongruency. It's become a little bit of a dilemma because I don't like to be recognized for being a triathlete. People will sometimes see me swim, or they'll see me doing a run, or just carry myself on the treadmill in a certain way, because I've been doing intervals lately. Nobody sees me doing any endurance running, but people have asked, and they've come up and said, "Hey, the gym is hosting a triathlon." And I'm like, do I just have that look about me? I don't understand. Where did you get the idea I might be interested? But, that is something that we're going to wrestle with probably all our lives. If we've been conditioned with something for 30 or 40 years, we're going to have to do a lot of mental rehearsal. We're going to have to do a lot of awareness of, what did we just say? Right? So you have to catch yourself in the moment. Training more, training like an athlete doesn't mean that you're going to get the same athletes you've always gotten if you have hormones that you've never had. Right? So it's going to change everything. You have to dance with your hormones in order to win the tango competition. Okay. So every woman is going to experience menopause in her life, right? The ability to potentially prevent the onset of specific symptoms like those hot flashes, the night sweats, through really basic interventions, as in, we should all be lifting weights. Every adult should be lifting weights, every adult over 29, certainly women over 50, because we will march into retirement homes more fit. Things will look very different if we do that later in life. So resistance training to increase lean body mass can positively impact us as we go into the second half. Whoops. Sorry about that. That little bump was me. This comes from the study of women's health across the nation. So it also was from 2020, really a recent study. Next up, moving right along, and this is really a short little clip here, but it's a combination of a couple things. And it's that during menopause, and let me back up before I go here, women compared to men are known to burn fat more, use fat for fuel more than males do. However, during menopause, and here it comes, women have a reduced fatty oxidation during exercise than women, say, pre-menopause. So whether we're talking about you in perimenopause or we're talking about you in post-menopause, the best time to start exercise, like qualified, focused exercise, strength training, high intensity exercise, would be in pre-menopause, so that we can continue to increase your lean muscle mass, which will continue to increase your ability to burn fat, not just during, but after the exercise. So if you haven't started to exercise before you even entered perimenopause, the next best time is during perimenopause. If you didn't do it then, the next best time is right now. Right now. All right. This study comes from Menopause. Ta-da! Right. Menopause, the journal, April of 2022. Very, very recent. But it's just one of those factors that we've always had an advantage. We tend to burn more fat for fuel than men do. It's part of the reason why women tend to just naturally have more endurance. You and your guy go out for a run. What does he want to do? He wants to sprint. He wants to run a mile really fast and then go to something else. And you would I'd rather go 3 miles, nice, easy, steady pace. And, yes, some of us are more inclined to have fast twitch muscle fiber, and or you've been a sprinter, you've done those short races and you like that. But the majority of women tend to like to do more endurance type of activity. And part of the reason is we can burn fat for fuel better than men. So we can go longer, and we're using fat for fuel. We don't get all that hungry. It just works really well for us until now, when it doesn't. Okay. 2 studies that are combined here to wrap things up. And then I'm going to give you some thoughts. Muscle in menopause. is not as sensitive to the protein that you eat. Therefore, we need more of it than you've ever needed in the past. There's evidence that we've been under eating protein for a very long time, following guidelines that were determined at one point for 18-year-old males going off to war to prevent disease like rickets and scurvy. I mean, how is that helpful now in 2022? It's kind of strange. But it's probably not going to be changed in our lifetime. That's just the facts of changing governmental standard like the RD is. But what we know is, you used to sit down and have, a hamburger. And what was that? 4, 5, 6 ounces if you had a really big burger of animal protein. Now you really have to make sure it's 6 ounces. And if there's a big patty sitting on that plate, don't look around the room and look at the men. Grab it. You probably need it more than your 16-year-old, right? So you really need to guard. Your personal need for protein is higher now than it has been. You need to get in more protein, and ideally you get it at a sitting, at a meal. It's not cruising and snacking all day and saying, well, I had a smaller lunch, I had a little bit of chicken on my salad, but not too much. So in the middle of the afternoon, I'm going to have some nuts and seeds because that'll have protein in it too. It's not going to work that way. So it's like your penicillin pill. If you're taking a dose of medicine and the doctor says take one at each meal 3 times a day, you're not going to, I hope you don't do this, cut it in half at lunch and just say, I think I'm just feeling half of it right now and I'll have the other half at 3. Because that's not the way the medication was intended to be taken. Food is medicine. Exercise, for that matter, is medicine. However, you need to have at least 30 grams of high quality, complete protein at a meal. That's your threshold. You've got to get over that threshold. Now, that's not the ceiling. It's the minimum. And that's a clarification that I've got to make over and over again. So rumors get passed really easily. So if somebody has in their head something and they think that's the truth, you've got to really be careful and ask for facts and ask for clarity and say, where'd you read that? I just really like to know, right? So during menopause, especially perimenopause is the best time, adjusting to a diet that is higher in protein and a little bit lower in carbohydrate. Making sure that you're keeping in those resistant starches, however, is going to really benefit your body composition. And those 2 studies actually there come from Science in August of 2021 and another 2019 article from Cell Reports, the journal. So let me give you the summary from the science. Here's what we know. In the absence of specific muscle building activities, such as eating more protein, strength training to muscular fatigue, each and every set, as heavy as you can, but at some point, you and I will decide, I'm feeling vulnerable, I can't go any heavier. And or you're going to have a joint by joint decision to make based on your prior history or injuries. But in the absence of specific muscle building activities, as estrogen declines, muscle loss will occur. Period. End of story. You're not going to keep it. So you are left to decide, do I just want to let go of my muscle and let aging take its course? Do I want to get weaker and fatter and more sedentary? Because that's what you're choosing. If you choose not to strength train, if you choose to ignore the fact that you actually have to eat more high quality protein in order to gain muscle, if you do strength train to get the benefit out of it, you need the protein. So let's come back to this one that we've discussed so many times. Does metabolism slow? Does it? So, the reason that you've heard that metabolism slows and fat increases is muscle wanes, that few women are lifting weights in a way that overloads their muscles. We've never seen it before. Imagine your mother right now. Now, mine is no longer here, but a year ago right now, she was 95. In fact, a year ago right now, she was 95 and she had just fallen and had her second hip replacement. That's not a good place to be if you're older, because that meant bed rest. And inactivity causes more muscle loss, more weakness. What happens then? You're vulnerable. So when she did get up and she was working through rehab and walking her way around using a walker, as stubborn as she is and independent as she is, she fell multiple times in the vision, the direct vision of people who could have helped her get whatever it was she wanted, but she went down. And with every fall, you become more vulnerable. You feel more afraid that you will fall. And that's a downward spiral that we could go through, or we could choose to prolong it. And maybe that won't be the thing that leads to a downward spiral for us. And yes, of course, something will. Bodies will give out. But I believe we've got a lot more choices about how and when before we get there. So I'd take a stab and say, your mother was probably in her 80s, maybe approaching her 90s. Maybe you're one of the young ones and your mom is in her 70s. Did she ever lift weights? Does she now? Imagine your older sisters and your sister-in-laws. Did they lift weights? Do they now? Do they lift to muscular fatigue? Do they think that lifting weights is the most important exercise that they do, and yet realize they should not do it more times a week? They should do it twice to muscular fatigue and rest between moving in other ways. But listen, they gained weight. If they didn't lift weights, they probably experienced fatigue, lack of muscle tone, lack of muscle. And why would that be? Because probably they did what was provided to them, what was moderate exercise, right? That's what it was. The older they got, the more encouraged they were to be careful not to exert themselves so much or to strain. I have a client, she's a virtual client. And she told me she had recently joined a gym because she's on Medicare right now. And as a part of that, she has free access to a gym, which is a great program, by the way. But as she was there, I have taught her how you lift to sustain your lean muscle mass. And for a small framed woman as herself, who spent a lot of time behind the computer or in court as a professional, she needs to lift weights and she needs to lift intensely. She was told by trainers who were observing her that she needed to back off a little bit. And I will tell you, she's got silver hair, like complete, although a very young looking face. By her demeanor and her probably hair, they were judging most likely what age she was and thinking that her effort level wasn't appropriate for a woman her age. Interesting. I probably told her, look, they've never seen it before. In the Midwest, where you are, there are very likely not very many people of your age working as hard as you work. They've never seen it before. Be sure you question them on why that would be true, that you shouldn't work as hard as you comfortably can to muscular fatigue. There's some things to be concerned about here. Because although, yes, if you have good form, you should be working hard, we don't want you hurt. So the question would be, if she needed some correction in form or technique, that's what should have happened. But she shouldn't have been told to back off, that she should take it a little bit easier, not push quite as hard. Interesting. Okay, here's the thing. The older our moms, our older sisters, older relatives got, the more encouraged they were to be careful, right? And not overexert, just like my client. Phooey, right? They also, just to give you an analogy, very few of those older people in our lives used computers at a very high level. Maybe they've played solitaire or they learned to FaceTime or use Facebook with their families. But you and I mean, we're not going to stop using computers in the way we've learned to use them. We will use them till we die. Now, generations that are 20 and 30 and 40 years younger are going to look at what we're doing and probably say, like, this is remedial. Like, they're just this old, you wouldn't believe these old things they're doing, right? But every time we age in a new generation, we're going to advance. So similarly to that use of computer, if you begin lifting now at whatever age that is for you now, you will gain strength beyond anything a prior generation experienced, beyond what you have now. And you'll improve your body composition and the quality of life as you age. You are going to resist the unknown. You're going to be a lone ranger in the weight room at the gym. Look, every time I go to a gym, I attract looks when I grab the dumbbells and I perform sprints on the treadmill. Those looks come from women who sometimes are following their partners around, and from young men picking up lighter weights than I am. And from older men, I hear these comments: "You work really hard." I mean, as if I shouldn't. It's kind of funny, but because it's different for them, they don't see it. Why don't we make it the norm? Few women work very hard, and fewer eat enough to grow muscle. After a couple of years of regular lifting, consistently lifting weights and doing other exercise, did you know this, that you have to have a caloric surplus in order to gain lean muscle mass? You know, those first couple of years when you start lifting weights, you don't have to make any other changes. You can just make that change and start lifting weights. No change in your diet, no change in other lifestyle habits. Now, I won't guarantee that you don't want to, because one good habit tends to lead to another good habit. And you get intrigued about, what else could I do to improve how I'm doing? Because I'm getting good results. I'm getting compliments. I'm seeing myself differently in the mirror. All those things happen and it begins to trigger something. But after about 2 years, and probably somewhat before that, you have to eat more. Your body will be burning more calories. And if you stay in a big caloric deficit, you won't lose weight. But what you want to do is focus on cycling. So you're going through periods of time where you're really focused on gaining muscle, and then you can cut back and you can do a little bit of caloric deficit, but not maybe going as hard, maybe during recovery periods for your weight training. And those are good for you too. So you may, if you go lower on your calories and you're still lifting weights, even if you're fasting, you may gain strength. There's proof that you can do that, but you may not gain lean muscle mass. Gaining lean muscle mass is what the ultimate benefit is. That's where the metabolically active tissue is. So you're a study of one. You don't have to take my word for it. Get yourself a smart scale that tells you your body composition and your lean muscle mass. So you'll know, am I gaining lean muscle mass? Am I losing lean muscle mass? Or am I maintaining it? Generally, it's going to be either gaining or losing. You're probably not going to just stay status quo. So if you're not gaining, and you want to increase your metabolism so that ultimately you could lose weight and burn more fat, you're going to have to eat more protein and overall more calories. Micronutrient dense calories are important in the whole scheme of things. The less you eat, the more you tell your body to shut down and burn less. That's not going to bode very well when you're putting your body under stress while you exercise. So there's a lot of things connected here to what happens, what's the effect of hormones on exercise, and vice versa. In fact, in July of this year, I'm going into a masterclass because we've had some questions on this, and it's been a minute since we visited this, but we are going to venture into what is the effect of hormones on exercise, and in fact, with HRT or without HRT, what's the advantage? What are the pros and cons of going on or not using it all? Who wins? Who does better? Who experiences no change whatsoever? I'm going to share the details, so stay tuned. You can visit the show notes, and if you're listening in real time right now, I would so appreciate it if you pass this on to a friend if this is of interest to them, wondering about where you are in premenopause, perimenopause, or postmenopause, and what impact your hormone levels have on your ability to gain lean muscle mass to therefore burn fat. This topic, if this episode was of interest to you, so too will be the masterclass, where we'll really go down with slides and look one by one at least 7 hormones associated with exercise and what you can do to optimize them with exercise, with diet, and what would be the effect of HRT on those as well. So, especially for women in menopause, we have to consider what our ability to create lean muscle mass is. If you can, lift heavy. When you can, eat higher, high quality protein levels. And overall caloric intake needs to be micronutrient dense, but a little bit higher in order to gain muscle mass. And last, keep your stress levels from all sources as low or as balanced by loving on people, loving on pets, thinking about positive memories. All those will help you offset stress. From this episode, very likely you have questions like, how do I start lifting weights heavily or doing that safely? And what is a diet that is micronutrient rich and high in protein and voids, though, of food sensitivities look like? How do you manage a gut that's experiencing gas and bloating or irregularity? And where does your walking and your yoga and your interval training fit in to the strength training? If you've got questions like those, I've got answers. I'll drop a few of them in the show notes. Resources for you next. The masterclass, July of 2022, that's July 13th, is one of them. If you're in luck and you reach out, we may have a replay for you. The cafe is open from the 1st through the 15th for the half year open enrollment. That means monthly and an annual basis. And inside the cafe, you'll find workouts. It's the number one reason people log in, but it's more than that. So you'll also find expert interviews, vetted recipes with no dairy, no soy, no gluten, but tons and tons of flavor. You'll also find masterclasses and Facebook Lives where twice monthly you get me live answering your questions collectively as the group, and we deep dive into topics that are echoed again and again inside in conversations. So it's in real time that we're choosing these. It's not a pre-formatted, I know what my topics are going to be for the year and that's that. It's actually we're listening, putting our ear to what you're saying and saying, there's a theme here. We need to hit it. I am a science girl and I want to cut through the junk and find the effective way to get fit, not hurt. Because I'm in the boat rowing with you. I'm busy. I only have so much time. So I use science featuring you, women just like you, to determine the effects of hormones on exercise and vice versa. This, Flipping 50, is the number one and the only exclusively made for menopause fitness membership in the world. There are other fitness programs, fitness platforms that say menopause, but they serve all ages. maybe all ages of women, maybe middle-aged men and women. But this is the only one exclusively for you. And we're kind of proud of that here. So we do you all day, every day. I'm going to leave the links that I mentioned in the show notes, and that will be at flipping50.com/effects of hormones on muscle. And these studies are really exciting. It's an exciting time to be a woman flipping 50. I mean, and of course, it's better than the alternative, but we are laying the foundation. You're doing things right now that, believe it or not, are breaking the glass ceiling. No one's done them before. Lifting heavy, quote unquote, at your age. I get it. But you've got to keep going. As long as you don't see yourself ever stopping, you want to make sure that you keep learning. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50.